We like to think that the end is something far off, a gray shadow waiting for us at the end of a long, winding road. We tell ourselves we have decades to figure out the big questions. But for Chloe, that road ended on a Tuesday afternoon in her own backyard. She was 19. She was healthy. And then for 17 minutes, she wasn't anywhere at all. What she brought back from those minutes isn't a story about pearly gates or clouds. It's a map of a 49-day process that every single one of us is going to face, whether we're ready or not. Most people aren't ready. Most people fail the first test because they don't even know they're being tested. Chloe is sitting in that same backyard today, 8 days after her heart stopped, because she needs to tell you what that first light actually is. Listen closely. This isn't just a testimony. It's a survival guide for the moment you stop breathing. The sun was actually too bright. That's the last thing I remember thinking. I was sitting right here in this wooden chair with the peeling white paint. I had this paperback book in my lap, something for my lit class, and the pages were so white they were stinging my eyes. The air smelled like the neighbor was mowing his lawn, that sharp, sweet scent of cut grass and damp earth. It was a perfect Tuesday. It was so normal it felt permanent. Then the taste hit me. It wasn't a pain, not at first. It was this sudden, overwhelming flavor of iron on the back of my tongue, like I'd sucked on a copper penny. My heart didn't scream. It just sort of stuttered. It felt like a bird trapped in a shoebox, flapping its wings once, twice, and then just giving up. I tried to stand up. I remember my fingers sliding off the cover of the book. I watched it hit the grass. I wanted to reach for it, but my arms felt like they were made of heavy, wet sand. I couldn't get the oxygen in. I was pulling at the air, but it felt thin, like I was trying to breathe through a handful of dust. The backyard started to tilt. The green of the trees intensified until it hurt to look at them, and then the sound arrived. It wasn't a noise from the street or the wind. It was a low, vibrating hum that seemed to be coming from inside my own bones. I fell. I didn't feel the impact. 1 second I was looking at the white pages of my book in the grass, and the next, I was looking at the top of my own head. It's the messiest thing I've ever seen. My body was just slumped there. My hair was fanned out in the dirt. I looked so small. I looked like a discarded coat. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel panicked. I felt this incredible sense of relief, like I'd been wearing a suit of armor that was 10 sizes too small and someone had finally unbolted the chest plate. I was light. I was clear. I stayed there for a second, hovering over the patio. I saw my mom come out the back door. I saw her drop the glass of iced tea she was holding. I heard the glass shatter on the stone, but the sound was miles away. I wanted to tell her I was fine. I wanted to tell her that being dead felt better than being alive. But as I reached out, the backyard started to dissolve. The trees, the house, the broken glass, they didn't fade out. They shattered into a million points of light, and then those points stretched until everything was just a solid, blinding white. This wasn't a tunnel. Everyone talks about the tunnel. This was more like being inside a diamond. It was a light that didn't just hit my eyes. It went through me. It felt like every secret I ever had, every lie I ever told, every thought I ever hid was being bleached white. It was terrifying because it was so honest. It was the clear light of reality. I felt this pull. It was like a giant magnet was calling to my very center. I knew instinctively that if I just let go, if I stepped into that light and stopped being Chloe, I would be free. I wouldn't have to come back. I wouldn't have to be a person anymore. I would just be. But I got scared. I thought about my cat. I thought about the fact that I hadn't finished that book on the grass. I thought about my mom's face when she saw me. I gripped onto my name. I am Chloe. I am 19. I am not ready to disappear. The moment I felt that fear, the light recoiled. It didn't leave, but it changed. It grew softer, dimmer, more manageable. And that's when I realized I wasn't alone. He didn't walk up to me. He was just there, like he'd been standing there since the beginning of time, and I'd finally just noticed him. He was tall, but his height didn't make sense in a physical way. He looked like he was made of the same light I'd just seen, but it was stepped down, like a lamp with a shade on it so it wouldn't burn me. His name didn't come through my ears. It just appeared in my mind. Gabriel. He didn't look like the paintings. No wings, no golden hair. He just looked solid. He looked like the truth. Chloe, he said. His voice was like the sound of the ocean inside a shell, clear, constant, and deep. You turned away. I felt this heavy weight in my chest, even though I didn't have a chest anymore. I didn't know what I was looking at, I told him. I thought it was going to swallow me. It was the first gate, Gabriel said. The moment the body fails, the ultimate truth reveals itself. If you can recognize it as yourself, you are finished with the cycle. You can go home, but you held onto the earth. You held onto the girl in the grass. I looked around. The white space was starting to change. It was becoming gray, like a thick fog was rolling in from every direction. Where am I? Is this heaven? Gabriel shook his head. His expression was full of something that felt like a sad kind of love. No, you are in the Baa, the bardo. This is the space between what was and what will be. You have 49 days, Chloe. This is a realm of your own making, but it is also a courtroom. I don't understand, I said. I died. My heart stopped. Why am I in a courtroom? The light from him warmed the gray fog. You are here because you aren't ready. Most people spend their lives avoiding the truth of their own minds. They think their thoughts are just noise. But here, your thoughts are the walls. Your fears are the monsters. Your attachments are the chains. He told me that for the next 49 days, I would be shown exactly who I was. He said that I had been sent back to learn this because the world had forgotten how to die. He said people think death is asleep, but it's actually the most awake you will ever be. You will return, Chloe, Gabriel told me. Your heart will beat again. But before you go back to the world of shadows, you must see what happens to the ones who stay. You must see the traps. He reached out and touched my hand. It didn't feel like skin on skin. It felt like a spark of electricity jumping between two wires. Suddenly, the gray fog started to swirl. The backyard was gone. The light was gone. We were standing in a hallway. It looked like a normal hallway in a normal house. The carpet was a dull beige. There was a framed picture of a beach on the wall. Look, Gabriel whispered. At the end of the hall, there was a woman. She was wearing a bathrobe and holding a coffee mug. She looked frantic. She was walking up to a door and trying to turn the knob, but her hand kept slipping through the brass. She'd look at her hand, confused, and then try again. Over and over. She died 3 days ago, Gabriel said. Why doesn't she stop? I asked. Because she doesn't believe it, he replied. She is so attached to her morning routine, to her house, to her life, that she is recreating it here in the BAU. She is trapped in a loop of her own memory. She will spend days, maybe weeks, trying to open that door until the hunger of her own soul forces her to move on. The woman started to scream then. It wasn't a loud scream. It was a thin, whistling sound, like wind through a crack in a window. She was calling for someone named David. David can't hear her, Gabriel said. David is at her funeral right now. But she is here, in the shell of her old life, refusing to look at the light because she's too busy looking for her keys. I felt a chill that went straight to the center of my being. Is that what happens to everyone? Gabriel looked at me, and for the first time, his eyes seemed to flash with a terrifying brightness. It happens to anyone who lives as if they will never die. It happens to the ones who think they are their bodies. He told me that the first week of the 49 days is the week of denial. It's when the soul wanders the earth, trying to talk to the living, trying to eat, trying to sleep, failing to realize that the rules have changed. I thought about my mom in the backyard. I thought about how I wanted to go back and tell her I was okay. Was I just like this woman? Was I just a ghost trying to turn a handle that didn't exist anymore? You are a bridge, Chloe, Gabriel said. You are seeing this so you can tell them. The first test isn't about being good or bad. It's about being aware. It's about knowing that the door is gone and having the courage to stop reaching for it. The hallway started to stretch. The walls began to bleed into a dark, bruised purple color. The beige carpet turned into something that felt like cold, wet ash. The first week is ending, Gabriel said. The peaceful visions are coming next. But remember what I told you? Do not trust what you see. Trust what you are. I wanted to ask him what he meant, but the air suddenly became heavy. The humming sound from the backyard returned, but this time it was louder. It felt like a freight train was rushing toward my head. Gabriel's face was the last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed the hallway. He looked like he wanted to catch me, but he just stood there, a pillar of light in a world that was rapidly turning into a nightmare. "You have 42 days left, Chloe. Don't lose yourself." Then the silence hit, a silence so loud it felt like it was crushing my ears. I was standing in the dark, and I could feel something moving just out of sight, something that smelled like old paper and dried flowers. I wasn't in my backyard anymore. I wasn't in the hallway. I was in the second stage, and I was alone. The darkness wasn't just an absence of light. It was heavy. It felt like walking through a room filled with thick, black velvet that kept getting caught in my throat. I stood there, 19 years old and technically a corpse in a backyard somewhere, trying to remember how to breathe, even though I didn't have lungs anymore. The smell of those dried flowers and old paper got stronger. It reminded me of my grandmother's attic, that scent of things that have been forgotten but haven't quite disappeared yet. Gabriel's voice was gone, but his words were echoing in my head like a skipping record. 42 days left. Do not trust what you see. I started to walk. I didn't know which way was forward, but staying still felt like I was letting the darkness settle into my skin. After what felt like hours, the blackness started to bleed into a dull, sickly yellow light. It was the color of an old bruise. I found myself standing on a street corner. It looked like my town, but everything was wrong. The houses were there, but the windows were like empty eye sockets. There were no cars, no birds, no wind. The silence was so loud it made my head throb. I saw a man sitting on a park bench. He was dressed in a suit, looking at a watch that didn't have any hands on it. He looked up at me, and for a second I felt this rush of hope. Someone else was here. "Excuse me," I said. My voice sounded flat, like I was speaking into a pillow. "Can you tell me where we are?" The man didn't answer. He just tapped the face of his watch and looked back down the street. I followed his gaze. A few yards away, there was a house with a for sale sign in the yard, but the sign was weathered and gray, like it had been standing there for a century. I walked closer to him. "Sir?" He looked at me again, but this time I saw his eyes. They weren't eyes. They were just swirling gray mist. He leaned in, and his breath smelled like cold ash. "I have to get to the meeting," he whispered. His voice was like dry leaves scraping on pavement. "If I'm late, I'll lose the account." "The house? I have to pay for the house." He got up and started walking toward the empty house. I watched him try to grab the doorknob, but his hand just passed through the wood. He didn't even flinch. He just stepped back, straightened his tie, and tried again. He looked at his hand, then at the door, and his face twisted into this look of pure, agonizing confusion. Then he reset. He walked back to the bench, sat down, and looked at his watch. He's been doing that for 12 days. Gabriel's voice suddenly resonated inside my mind. I jumped, looking around for him, but the street remained empty. "Gabriel, where are you?" "I am where you are, Chloe," the voice replied. "You are seeing the third gate. This is the realm of the hungry ghosts, not because they want food, but because they are starving for a reality that no longer exists." The man on the bench was caught in a loop. Gabriel explained that this man had spent 40 years defining himself by his job and his property. Now that the body was gone, the only thing left was the habit. He didn't know he was dead because he had never really been alive. He had just been a series of meetings and mortgage payments. "Is he stuck here forever?" I asked. "Until he realizes the watch has no hands," Gabriel said. "Until he looks at the door and realizes he doesn't need to go inside. But the bayou is a mirror. It only shows you what you bring with you." I backed away from the man, feeling a lump in my throat. I thought about my own life, my Instagram feed, my grades, my obsession with what people thought of my outfit at the party last Friday. Was I going to end up on a bench somewhere, looking at a phone that wouldn't turn on? I ran. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to get away from the sound of that man's tie rustling against his shirt. As I ran, the bruised yellow sky started to brighten. The gray houses began to shimmer and transform. Suddenly, I wasn't on a dead street anymore. I was in a garden. It was the most beautiful place I had ever seen. The flowers were huge, glowing with colors I didn't have names for. Pinks that felt like warmth, blues that felt like peace. I could hear music, but it wasn't coming from instruments. It was like the light itself was singing. And then I saw them. My best friend Sarah was there. She was sitting on a stone bench, wearing the yellow dress she'd lost 3 years ago. And my grandfather was there too, looking young and strong, the way he did in the old photos in the hallway. They were smiling at me. "Chloe," Sarah called out. She stood up and opened her arms. "We've been waiting for you." "It's okay now. You're home." I started to cry. The relief was so heavy, I felt like I could finally sink into the ground and sleep. I ran toward her. I wanted to tell her about the man on the bench, about the darkness, about Gabriel. I wanted her to hold me and tell me that the 17 minutes were over and I was safe in heaven. I was inches away from her. I could see the tiny freckles on her nose. I could smell her perfume, the vanilla scent she always wore. But then I remembered Gabriel's warning. "Do not trust what you see." I stopped. "Sarah? Come here, Chloe," my grandfather said. His voice was so kind, so familiar. "Just step into the circle. You don't have to be afraid anymore." I looked at Sarah's eyes. They were beautiful, but they were too perfect. There was no flicker of movement, no light shifting in the pupils. It was like looking at a high-definition photograph. I thought about the last time I saw Sarah. We'd had a stupid fight. I'd said something mean about her boyfriend, and we hadn't talked for 2 days. But this Sarah wasn't mad. This Sarah was a blank slate of forgiveness. "You aren't real," I whispered. The garden went silent. The music didn't stop, but it turned sharp, like a violin string snapping. Sarah's smile didn't fade. It stretched. It grew wider than a human mouth should be. Her skin started to turn the color of wet parchment. "Chloe, don't be difficult," she said, but her voice was changing. It was becoming Gabriel's ocean voice, but distorted, like it was being played through a broken speaker. I backed away. The beautiful flowers started to wilt and turn black. The glowing pinks and blues curdled into the color of dried blood. "You are a projection," I said, my voice shaking. Gabriel said these were the peaceful visions. He said they were reflections of my own mind. "If you won't accept the peace," my grandfather said, his face beginning to melt and sag like hot wax, "then you must accept the rest." The garden vanished. The ground beneath me turned into a jagged floor of broken glass and rusted metal. The sky turned a violent, screaming red. And then the things arrived. They didn't come from the distance. They tore their way out of the air right in front of me. They were massive, hideous entities with multiple heads and arms that ended in hooks. Their faces were twisted into masks of pure rage. One of them had a face that looked exactly like mine, but the eyes were sewn shut with black thread and the mouth was leaking ink. I screamed and fell back onto the glass. It cut into my hands, but there was no blood, just that cold, humming vibration. The entities circled me. They didn't attack. They just loomed, their shadows falling over me like heavy stones. They started to speak, but it wasn't words. It was thoughts. Every time I'd ever been jealous. Every time I'd lied to my parents to go to a party. The time I'd cheated on a math test in junior high. Every bitter thought I'd ever had about myself. Every moment of self-hatred I'd buried deep in my chest. These things weren't demons from a pit. They were the jagged shapes of my own secrets. They were my guilt given form. The entity with my face leaned down. The ink from its mouth dripped onto my chest and it felt like liquid lead. "Why are you running?" it asked. Its voice was my voice, but deeper, meaner. "This is what you built. This is who you are when no one is watching." I tried to crawl away, but the entities were everywhere. I felt this overwhelming urge to give up, to let them tear me apart. I thought that if I just died again, if I let the shadows win, the pain would stop. But then I saw a flicker of that white light from the very beginning. The clear light. It was tiny, like a star at the end of a very long tunnel. I looked at the entity with my face. I looked at the hooks and the multiple heads. "You aren't real either," I choked out. The entities roared. The sound was like 1,000 glass windows breaking at once. They lunged at me, their claws inches from my throat. "You are me," I said, closing my eyes. "You are just my fear. You have no power." The moment I said it, the moment I truly believed it, the red sky shattered. The entities didn't disappear. They dissolved. They turned into gray mist and blew away in a wind I couldn't feel. I was standing in the dark again. But the darkness was different now. It didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt empty. Gabriel was standing a few feet away. He wasn't glowing as brightly as before, or maybe I was just getting used to the light. "You passed the second test, Chloe," he said. I was shaking. My hands were still vibrating from the glass. "I almost stayed with them," I told him. "I almost stayed in the garden with Sarah." That is the trap of the second week, Gabriel said. Many souls stay in the garden. They choose the pleasant illusion because they are afraid of the truth. But if you stay in the garden, you never grow. You stay a child in a dream until the karmic wind blows you into a new life you didn't choose. And the monsters? They are the gatekeepers of your own evolution, he said. If you can look at your own rage and your own guilt and say, this is mine, but it is not me, then they lose their teeth. You have faced the wrathful ones. You have seen the mirrors of your own heart. He stepped closer, and the empty darkness started to fill with thousands of tiny, shimmering threads. They looked like spider webs made of light, stretching out in every direction as far as I could see. The 21st day is over, Chloe, Gabriel said. The visions of form are finished. What happens now? I asked, looking at the glowing threads. Now, Gabriel said, his voice becoming solemn, we look at the weight of what you've done. We look at the life you left behind, not as you remember it, but as it truly was. He reached out and plucked one of the threads. The darkness around us began to pulse with a heartbeat. My heartbeat. It's time for the review, Gabriel whispered. Suddenly, I wasn't in the BAU anymore. I was back in the 3rd grade. I was standing on the playground, and I was looking at a girl named Maya. I remembered this day. I'd made fun of her shoes because I wanted to make the cool girls laugh. But I wasn't just watching myself. I was Maya. I felt the hot sting in her cheeks. I felt the way her stomach tightened into a knot. I felt the shame that stayed with her for the rest of the day, making her want to disappear into the floor. I gasped, trying to pull away, but the thread held me tight. No, I whispered. Please. But Gabriel didn't answer. The review had begun, and there were 28 days left to go. The feeling of being Maya was worse than the monsters with the multiple heads. It was worse because it was real. I could feel the thin fabric of her cheap sneakers. I could feel the way her heart hammered against her ribs. Not with terror, but with that slow, crushing weight of being small and unwanted. When I laughed, the Chloe me, the one standing on the playground, it didn't sound like a joke. It sounded like a slamming door. I felt the exact moment her confidence withered, a tiny flame being snuffed out by a girl who just wanted to feel important for 5 seconds. Gabriel was right. There was no judge sitting on a throne. There was just the truth. And the truth was that my words weren't just air. They were stones. The review didn't stop at the playground. It accelerated. The threads of light I'd seen earlier began to vibrate, pulling me into 1,000 different moments at once. I was my mom, standing over the sink late at night, feeling the silent ache of worry because I'd snapped at her for asking about my day. I felt the physical sting of my impatience in her chest. I was my younger brother, feeling the cold vacuum of being ignored when I was too busy on my phone to help him with his Lego set. But it wasn't just the bad things. Suddenly, I was the lady at the grocery store, the one whose name I didn't even know. I'd held the door for her when her hands were full of bags. In the review, I felt the tiny spark of warmth that gesture gave her. It was a small thing to me, but to her, it was the only piece of kindness she'd felt all day. It felt like a drop of cool water on a parched tongue. I saw how every single action I took created a ripple. I saw that the world isn't made of objects or people, but of these invisible connections. We are all breathing each other's air. We are all carrying each other's weight. I don't want to see anymore, I told the darkness. My voice felt heavy, saturated with the emotions of everyone I'd ever touched. I get it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The review began to slow down. The scenes of my life blurred into a fast-moving smear of color until I was back in the empty, dark space with Gabriel. He looked different now. The light coming from him was softer, almost like a candle flickering in a dark room. It is not about being sorry, Chloe, he said. It is about seeing the resonance. You are not a separate thing. You are a note in a larger song. If you play a harsh note, the whole song suffers. If you play a note of peace, the song heals. How long have I been here? I asked. My mind felt exhausted, stretched thin by the weight of 19 years of living and dying. 35 days have passed in the Bayou, Gabriel said. You are entering the final stage, the stage of the crossroads. He gestured into the void, and the threads of light began to change. They stopped being memories and started being possibilities. I saw glimpses of things that didn't make sense. I saw a woman in a crowded city I'd never visited, holding a baby. I saw a man working in a field under a sun that looked too big for the sky. I saw a girl sitting in a classroom, her face full of a brilliance and a hunger for knowledge I recognized. "What are those?" I whispered. "The next life," Gabriel said. "The karmic seeds you've planted are seeking soil. Your desires, your fears, your attachments, they are drawing you toward a new body." I felt a sudden violent pull. It was like a hook in my navel, dragging me toward the vision of the woman with the baby. It felt warm. It felt safe. It felt like an easy way out of the darkness. "If you reach for it," Gabriel warned, his voice ringing like a bell, "you will be born again. You will forget this place. You will forget me. You will forget the girl in the backyard. You will start the cycle over, carrying the same weights and the same secrets until you learn to let them go." I looked at the vision. I could almost feel the softness of the baby's skin. I wanted to go. I wanted to not be Chloe anymore. I wanted to escape the memory of Maya's shoes and the broken glass on the patio. But then I looked at Gabriel. "Is there another way?" Gabriel pointed upward, or what felt like upward. There was no vision there. No people, no houses, no lives. There was just that first light, the clear light of reality. It was still there waiting. "You can choose to not choose," he said. "You can let go of the need to be someone. You can merge with the truth." I stood at the center of the crossroad. The pull toward the new lives was getting stronger. It was like a physical wind, blowing me toward the mirages of comfort. I could hear voices calling my name. Not Chloe, but other names. Names I hadn't earned yet. But through the wind, I heard something else. It was a faint, rhythmic sound. Thump, shump, shh, the sound of a ventilator. And then I heard my mom. She wasn't in the BU. She was somewhere else. Somewhere cold and bright and smelling of bleach. "Please, Chloe," she was whispering. Her voice was cracked, broken by a week of crying. "Please come back. Don't leave me here." The pull of the new lives vanished. The vision of the woman and the baby shattered. Gabriel moved closer. His form was becoming translucent. "The 49 days are not yet finished, Chloe. But your time in the bayou is being interrupted." "I don't want to go back to the pain," I said. I remembered the taste of iron. I remembered the bird in the shoebox. "The pain is the price of the lesson," Gabriel said. "You were given this glimpse for a reason. You are the one who returned from the 17th minute." Suddenly, the darkness of the ball began to tear. It wasn't a gentle fade. It was like a curtain being ripped down by violent hands. The silence was replaced by a cacophony of sound, beeping monitors, the sharp metallic snap of a defibrillator charging, shouted orders. "Clear!" The first shock hit me. In the bayou, it felt like a bolt of lightning had struck my soul. I was thrown backward, away from Gabriel, away from the light. I felt my consciousness being forced back into a container that was too small and too cold. No, I screamed, but I didn't have a voice. The world of the bayou was dissolving. Gabriel was a fading spark in a sea of gray. Remember, he called out, his voice a distant echo. "Death does not change you. It reveals you." "Wake up, Chloe." The second shock hit. My chest exploded. That's the only way to describe it. It felt like someone had driven a truck over my ribs. I felt the cold, hard surface of a hospital bed beneath me. I felt the plastic tube shoved down my throat, scraping against my windpipe. I tried to open my eyes, but the light was too much. It wasn't the beautiful, bleaching light of the bardo. It was the harsh, artificial glare of the ICU. I heard a nurse gasp. "We have a rhythm. She's back." I felt the first breath. It was agony. It felt like my lungs were being filled with broken glass. I coughed, the ventilator fighting against my own reflex. My heart, that tired little bird, started to flap again. 17 minutes. That's what they told me later. My heart had been stopped for 17 minutes. The doctors called it a miracle. They talked about the cold weather slowing my metabolism. They talked about the quick response of my mom. They looked at my brain scans and shook their heads because there was no damage. But I knew why. I wasn't gone for 17 minutes. I was gone for 49 days. I spent a week in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling. People brought me flowers. They told me how lucky I was. They told me I had my whole life ahead of me. But I couldn't tell them that I'd already seen my whole life. I'd felt the weight of it. I'm 18 days out from my death now. I'm sitting in the same backyard where it happened. The neighbor is mowing his lawn again. The grass still smells sweet. But I don't look at the trees the same way. I don't look at my phone the same way. Every time I speak to someone, I think about the resonance. I think about the stones I'm throwing into the water. I'm still 19. I'm still a student, but I'm also a traveler who has seen the map. I know that one day I'll be back in that gray fog. I'll see Gabriel again. I'll stand at that crossroads, and the woman with the baby will call my name. But this time, I'll be ready. I won't reach for the handle of a door that isn't there. I won't run from the monsters I made myself. I'll look at the light and I'll know that it's me. Chloe's story isn't just about a medical anomaly. It's a reminder that the life we are living right now is the rehearsal for the journey we all have to take. We spend so much time worrying about how we look, what we own, and who is winning. But in the bardo, none of that carries weight. The only thing that stays with you is the clarity of your own mind and the impact you had on the souls around you. 17 minutes changed Chloe's world, but it should also change yours, because the 49 days are coming for everyone. The question is, when the first light appears, will you have the courage to merge with it, or will you spend your eternity trying to open a door that's already been locked? Live with awareness, because death won't change who you are. It will only show you the truth of what you've become.